The benefit of what I do when people come over here is they often give me a menu of what they think they want from life. And by understanding what they really think, it could be a case that someone likes tennis, but they need a certain type of club, or it could be education that's important. And for people, when they're looking at Ireland, we take it for granted because we assume everywhere is like that, or it's a boring thing to have. But Ireland really has a lot to offer.
Andrew, how you doing, bud? Thanks for joining.
Thank you for having me. Delighted to be here.
I think you might be our first international guest on the show. Love the accent, by the way. I'm Irish. Mead is my last name. Latin Mead, Irish name. Does it sound like one or no?
It does, yeah. Mead with an M, as in from mother. Yeah, yeah. There you go.
E on the end. Yeah.
Yeah, nice. I'll send over a blood test kit after this just to make sure. Okay.
Andrew, excited to have you on. I know you have a really popular newsletter. And one thing that I've read about you is you started as a psychology major. I always like meeting with people and finding out how they got here. Some people were teachers, and some don't think I've met a psychologist. You learned something when you were studying psychology. I think you brought it into your strategy. Why don't you give everyone a little rundown of who you are and how it helps you?
Yeah, so very simple. Short story is I originally studied psychology. I realized that a common thread in why I enjoyed psychology was actually people. And as I went through my professional career, it was people and selling. And I always sold a little bit differently. I always found a way of connecting with people and being really authentic. And as I got older, I realized that that was probably my superpower or my skill set that set me apart. And I went from setting up my own businesses, doing kind of live events almost where you're trying to sell robotic lawnmowers before they were a cool thing. They were back when it was, magic to people. And then I was in the car business, and I worked in the car business for free to understand what the pain points were. And one of the great things about that it taught me was that I had a soul for a start. So when I was selling something to someone, I did it the right way. I was able to build relationships. And little did I know that I was creating a methodology for reaching out to people, connecting with them, being able to sell when appropriate, but also building for the long term. And now that I'm in property the last 10 years, I've just applied that and I help people source property. So I work with expats, business owners, high net worth people, and I just guide them through the labyrinth of property by assessing what it is they really want from life and advocating. And a lot of that is down to asking the questions that people maybe don't think to ask or listen to what people aren't telling me, which is very important.
Well, let's get into those questions. I mean, obviously, I want to get into electric lawnmowers, but I'm going to go back to that. So we'll start off with those questions that not many people know what to ask or how to ask. Give us some examples.
One of the biggest challenges for people nowadays is we're overeducated to an extent. And obviously we have access to a plethora of books, online resources, and opportunities to expand our knowledge. But the other side of that is that it's very easy to do things and overthink. So what I try and do when I speak with people is I listen to the things they're not telling me. So if I was talking to you and you were with either a stakeholder or a partner or whatever it may be, look for the visual cues of what your other half or your partner is saying when you're talking about your live stream. And instead of glossing over it and pretending I don't see them wince or see them being uncomfortable in the situation, I will dig into why they may seem uncomfortable. So it starts to sound like a therapy session, but what I'm actually doing is giving both people the opportunity to talk without fear of it turning into a shouting match. And when people have money, the money part of it isn't the problem. It makes life any easier in any other way. You can't buy your way out of certain emotions. They'll always find their way to the top. So when I'm asking people the questions, a lot of the time I'm saying, what is it you really want from life? So if someone's buying a big house and they want to have a beautiful room to showcase it to family and friends, instead of saying, yeah, absolutely, let me take your budget, charge you the fee, find you this property, and then hope you lose my phone number, I say, who's it for? Maybe that one question could be, it might actually be a teacher in school who was mean to them, who, gave them that chip on their shoulder or the fuel to create a great business and be a success. Or maybe they just love to entertain. But I want to dig at the questions that maybe people haven't been asked by well-meaning family, friends, colleagues who are too polite or who may see it as being blatantly obvious that someone is maybe overcompensating for something. And I'm coming from a place of kindness where I ask that question. And I suppose the main premise of everything I do is advocating for people to find their version of winning. And that could be through difficult conversations. It could be about talking about their health. And a lot of it is just giving them the platform to be able to talk about the things that fall outside of a property transaction, but they also form part of everyday life, which is so key to the process.
When you're studying psychology, what is your take on nature versus nurture? And for the successful people that you've seen, does they have a chip on their shoulder or is it something else?
The two ways I've seen it in my experience, it tends to be one of two things. So you will have everyone has a different fuel source. So I've met successful people, and if you ask them what is their most vivid memory of something that got them to be so driven, it'll be something negative. So it may be that their family had their house taken away from them. It may be seeing a family member lose their job, job or not having some of the finer things in life. Or it may have been someone who didn't believe in them. And you wouldn't believe the impact that someone, let's say when they're in education, when they're young and they're impressionable, if they have a teacher who's a bit of a bully, you may find that one remark that someone made when they're 10 or 11 is something that they literally carry on their shoulder. So when they become this success, and I met someone who did this, they were a really big success. And I mentioned in passing something about a school because I understood what school they went to. They were immediately in that moment. And they brought up that moment in time where someone called them stupid. And they almost wanted to fly the teacher in and say, look, I'm not so stupid now, am I? So that's one side of it. That was one bit of the fuel. Another side of it is resilience, where people have experienced certain things that are challenging and they want to make a difference, but they do so with a different intent. So, Tony Robbins has this thing of wanting to feed 1 billion people. You'll have someone else that says, I want to change people's lives. So when you look at the nature versus nurture, kind of an opinion thing, but I've seen people who have grown up with very successful family members, and by virtue of not having to struggle or not having to learn, they've gone on to blow the next generation's fortune or not had the same desire. And I've seen people who haven't had those figures in their lives, who've had to grind, who've had to build it up, and then have created this wonderful life based on this initial feeling of lack. And everyone's version of that is different. One person, it could be that they want a stable family life. Another person, it could be a really nice car. And another person, it could be a business with 100 plus people and revenue of XYZ. So it's a real plethora of society. But one common thing I do see is it's like the generational. The first generation sows it, second generation grows it, and the third generation blows it. So that's the thing to avoid.
I feel like those negative experiences create a motivation of some kind that they never forget. And that a lot of times is the reasoning for people's success. It's interesting because one thing I think about my kids is like, I don't want to create this life that's too good for them where there's no motivation. What do I need to do to motivate these kids? But this is a good point. This is a good question. Something I think about a lot.
Yeah, well, funny enough, you just got to watch Full Metal Jacket. Wake them up at 2 a.m, hit them with some soap and a sock, shout at them, tell them they're not worthy, and then just see what happens. No, I think the best way to describe it is every generation wants to do a little bit better than the previous generation, and we will always learn lessons from our past. So let's say my father was a smoker, and my vivid memory of my father, who's now passed away, sitting on a bed smoking before he gets out of bed. I wanted to be a fit dad who my kids looked up to and said, oh, where's dad? He's in the gym. Or maybe that I want them to aspire to do things. But one thing I'm keenly aware of is we will learn things from the previous generation, but we will also make mistakes with our kids. It's just a different flavor. And I think when you're trying to instill values in kids, I think there is growth in discomfort. And I think there has to be, it's almost that let's use the phrase supervised suffering. And I don't mean you wake them up and you attach electrodes to them, but the equivalent of falling off a bike. If you know they're okay and you're there in the wings to pick them up if they need it, you can also let them understand what that challenge may be. And I think that's a great way to build resilience. My daughter did it where she read Andy Frisella's book, Charlie's Fantastic Fruit Stand. She wanted to set up a fruit stand, so we let her do it. She languished outside for 2.5 hours with no one coming because I made a point of not telling anyone she was there because I wanted her to stand there. She wanted to come in. I told her to stick it out. I sent a text, and then she made €100 from my well-meaning neighbors who bought an overpriced apple. But the concept was she needed to understand the discomfort to appreciate the result.
Like it. This is good. I'm getting the psychology class that I always wanted on my own podcast. This is great. Because recently I heard there's going to be robots out there that are going to be working 24/7 and they're going to be taking care of a lot of the tasks while we're sleeping. So is this a thing? I mean, are there going to be robots cutting our grass? Or tell me about the electric lawnmower, automatic lawnmower. Maybe, I don't know, what was it? Was it actually running itself? Or did you actually have to hold something down and make it electric?
It's a distant memory now. It was about 20 years ago. So we brought in lawnmowers and bean bags, would you believe? And at the time, you were obviously trying to grab someone at a live roadshow, and you say, "Sir, have you ever sat on a glorified bean bag that goes into 11 different positions? And do you hate cutting your grass too?" And they're looking down at this really ugly box that's meant to cut the grass, and obviously it's not working because you're trying to do a live presentation. But I think it's become a lot better now. It's like everything; it's quantities of scale. I think nowadays people are looking to optimize, and I think like everything, what started off as IBM computer that takes up an entire room and costs millions, we now have people who look at, a robot where it's maybe between $150 and $400. If it works for 6 months, great. It's almost a bit of a gadget. It's something that's unique. And I think people are kind of gradually coming around to robots doing the boring side of life. But I would also say, like we were talking earlier about boring businesses, sometimes the money or the unique proposition is actually in the boring stuff. So I think people would want to almost, you have to keep your hand in. You still have to learn how to cut the grass and know how to do things, because if robots do it, you might find yourself bored quite quickly.
You got to be careful with what you want to automate. So, like for example, the most information I get from my kids is on a car ride to and from school. You don't want to just, have a car taking them there and back because that's when they open up to. It's one of those few times when they don't have a device in their hand. There's just you and them, so they kind of have to listen and talk. Those certain things that you could automate actually open up more of like the values and the personal relationships. Look at us just talking about AI and things non-real estate. Really, I like it.
We're hitting all the right notes already. Next stop, the moon and how to fix the world.
All right. So you work with, typically when you look at your clients, a lot of high net worth individuals, where exactly are they buying?
So the interesting thing about Ireland is, although we're small, we have a number of elements that people and Irish people take it for granted because growing up here, it's like living in near New York or in Times Square. Times Square is not really special to people who live near it, or if you live near, the mountains where you go skiing, it's not always something that seems unique. But Ireland seems to have a draw for people, especially when they're international. Maybe they've successfully exited a business, or they want to explore Europe for the latter half of their lives. And we see people that want a bolt hole in Ireland, and they take a view that it could be the island of Ireland, but let's say, for example, you could drive the entirety of Ireland pretty much in 6.5 hours, give or take. And I know some lunatics who go skiing for the weekend and it could take a 9 hour drive, and they just do that for the pleasure of a day on the slopes in the States and Canada. So for Ireland, I think people look at it and they think it's got a great lifestyle. So you could be in the city centre at a business meeting, and you said you're going to an event. So you could be at an event in Dublin, and that afternoon you could be at the beach or up the mountains mountain biking. And when people look at Ireland, they look at it from a language perspective. So people say it's an easy way to integrate. From a location perspective, they have a jumping off point for the rest of Europe. So if they come here, they have a base to go to Spain, the UK, France, wherever it may be. And then lifestyle. Ireland is a small place in a lot of ways, but it's also a great place to be able to create a connection with people, or a community. So the benefit of what I do when people come over here is they often give me a menu of what they think they want from life. And by understanding what they really think, it could be a case that someone likes tennis, but they need a certain type of club, or it could be education that's important. And for people, when they're looking at Ireland, we take it for granted because we assume everywhere is like that, or it's a boring thing to have. But Ireland really has a lot to offer for people who want to use it as a base, because it's an easy transition. They don't have to learn the language. We're very relatively easygoing, and there's no real extreme weather events yet.
How does it work over there in terms of being let's call it a real estate agent? Are you licensed per country? Are you licensed multiple countries? How does that work?
So we have a governing body where you have to do a 2 year course to be certified as a real estate agent, and you have to keep up your license every year. You have to do your CPD, which is your continual professional development, and then you're subject to being audited quite regularly as well. And I suppose one of the benefits of that is that when you're supporting people, you have to have a license to be able to transact, unless you are selling your own home. So if you're, for sale by owner, people do that, but it's very, very rare. The majority of people in Ireland defer to a selling agent. And the majority of agents, I would say probably 95% of them, are selling or rental agents. And there's not that many buying agents because it's a more international American style model. But that's where I saw the niche. I did have a business course that I wrote, or a buy a property course. So one of the ways I find that drives value for people is by virtue of what my business does, we either repel or attract. And I think one of the things that I tried to do setting up my own agency was, imagine 5 or 6 years ago, if you were at a dinner party and someone asked what Andrew did, it's a very generalist approach, so rentals, sales, a bit of this, valuations. There was no real, specific focused approach that you could say, well, Andrew does X. And the more I built it in, the more I realized when it came to the buy side, I wanted you to be at a dinner party and say, well, Andrew's a brain surgeon and he only looks at this particular part of the brain, so don't show him your sore knee. And the more I began to do that, I realized that my unique way of dealing with people, driving value for them, giving them assessments of markets, and a lot of it was drilling into the stuff that people didn't necessarily want to talk about. Along that way, I realized that not everyone's going to be my client. So I put together a very simple course. It's very frank. Like it's very simple. Like when I'm looking at the camera like this, I'm looking at you into your soul. Well, not into your soul, but I'm kind of asking you those tough questions through the camera. And my idea with that was just to keep it free. So if no one ever watches it, fine. If lots of people watch it, great. But I'm the type of person where if I meet you and you're not my type of client, and you're open to it, I'd rather give you a steer and see you on the right path and associate me in a good light for the future that you may grow. Who's not to say you're going to be in the C-suite in 10 years time. My goal is to set people on the right path. And that, coupled with my bi-weekly newsletter, it's called Shut the Front Door. The idea is to discuss the things that people maybe don't want to talk about. So property is property, but people don't do articles on death and how that plays a role in property. When you have a company acquired, everyone wants a piece of you. But how about someone who maybe asks the questions of, well, why don't you do nothing for 2 years? Set aside some money, buy a silly watch. If you really enjoy your house like Warren Buffett, you don't don't have to get a bigger house. If you're selling because of something sad, let's talk about it. Let's give people the impetus to really have those open conversations. And I get messages time and again about articles that I would have done 6 months or a year ago about tough topics, but it gives people in the broader audience the sense that they can maybe start the conversation with someone because someone has actually brought it up. Because I've often found, by virtue of my life's experience, I had a number of people die at a young age. And one of the great elements of resilience was that you're never going to get the poor you approach from me. You're never going to get the head tilt or the awkwardness. So if I give you the platform to talk about your challenges, you don't have to worry about being judged. You can get it out in the open, and then that gets you thinking clearly about all the transactions you're going to make, your relationships with family and friends, your job, and equally your property. And my goal was to just get people really reflecting on those different various parts of life, which is really enjoyable.
It doesn't sound like the normal real estate agent I talk to over here in America. I love the psychology background. This is really useful.
Well, I think the best way to describe when it comes to anybody is, so first and foremost, you can tell that you're driven, but you're driven by something different. So I think when you're speaking with people, you're very relatable. And I think it's a very relaxed way to come to a table and understand what you can learn from someone, not what you can show them. So it's that old adage of being interested rather than interesting. And what I love about conversations like this are, it's not a one-upmanship. It's not figuring out how I can steal what you do for a living and make some money and steal some of your market share. But your mindset is about growth. It's about driving value. You already told me about the level of employees and the retention and happiness you have. That doesn't happen by accident. You could be making loads of money, but have miserable employees who want to jump ship. And even you mentioned the environment you've created for your office. So you're very aware of what your employees and your staff want from life. And I think when it comes to your personality traits, if I was to look at it, a lot of it is, it's little, we all have every trait. So I remember I have a business mentor that says we have something along the lines of 2,678 traits, right? Let's just say it's in and around that. And I remember he asked me, how many traits do you think you have? And I was trying to figure out, I'm angry, I get this, I get that. He says, no, you have them all. But what you don't like in other people is what you don't recognize in yourself. And I thought it was a really fascinating insight into how we all interact with people. But the type of person you are, from what I gather from our brief chat, is you're open, you're relatable, you're driven, but you're also very aware. And when I think when you can talk about things in that way, you're not closed off. You're not telling me, you're not like feeding me like a mushroom where you're feeding me a line that you think will keep me quiet. You have nothing to be afraid of. So you're just going with it. And I think everyone else could probably feel that off you.
Thank you. Excellent work, my friend. Do you make it to America much?
I used to. I had a brother who was in New York for quite a long time, and it was quite a funny one because the Baz Luhrmann song, "Move to New York, but leave before it makes you too hard." He forgot to leave before it made him too hard, so it was a bit of a bedding in period when he moved back to Ireland. He was still very New Yorker, but we used to go over to the States quite a bit. I used to go to Clearwater quite a bit when I was younger, and New York quite a bit. But in the last number of years, with COVID and with building my business and having two young kids, it's funny when you have a 9-year-old and a 4-year-old. Ice cream tastes the same here as it does in another country, so I just brought them up the road instead of across the water.
Smart. It's smart. I like it. I've never been to Ireland, my home roots, so I need to step up on that. I did go to Scotland a couple of years ago on a little golf trip, which was lovely. Would love to make it to Ireland. If I go to Ireland, where am I going? Am I going to Dublin? Is there somewhere else you recommend?
So the one simple bit of advice I would say is, do not do a speed dating tour of Ireland. The amount of Americans who come here for 6 days and they view 48 counties and do 28 tours and wonder why they didn't get a real taste of Ireland. I would say give yourself the time. If you're only coming for 3 or 4 days, pick 1 or 2 locations that are close to each other. And then if you were doing it, and this is an open invitation, you can let me know and I will talk you through the things that'll work well. So I would look at what you really want. So simple example, you mentioned golf before. Do you want to play golf, or is it family? Do you want to do tours and be told about the history of X, or do you want to explore an area? Or do you want to disappear down into a really wholesome Irish hotel that has really great doormen, it's in the middle of nowhere, and that gives you a real sense of the Irish countryside? So front load that and get what it is you want from your experience, and then don't try and do too much, because it's literally like viewing too many houses in one day. I've had clients who came to me viewing 8 houses in one day, and I asked them the color of the first front door, couldn't remember. So you want your experience to be memorable.
Love it. Cool. I mean, your newsletter is very successful. I believe you have over 40 or 50,000 people that have joined it. I'm going to be signing up for it. I
Thank you.
love the direct, no BS concept you got going. Has it ever backfired?
Yeah. So I think what's unique about Ireland, and especially when it comes to agents, is that if you're having a conversation with someone, Ireland has I suppose I would encourage a lot of agents, because I think there's a real opportunity for agents to be the expert in their field, to kind of show that leadership. And if you go into a doctor and you have a lump on your arm and they tell you it's XYZ, you can't convince them it is otherwise just by virtue of what you want. And one of the unique things about property is you could be seen as being pessimistic if you're not giving someone the price they want or the price they need. So I remember when I was selling years ago, you could have someone that has a property worth 700,000 euro and they may need a million. And I would often say, well, if you put a gun to my head and I was in court right now, 700,000 is the figure from a bank valuation, from a comparison, a comparable example. But if the market lifts or if someone comes out of a certain country and has to have your property, maybe you will get a million. And then they would choose an agent who said, yeah, sure, a million sounds good, because they'd be mentally thinking of that churn conversation in time to come. I suppose how I may put people's noses out of joint is by not simply telling them what they want to hear. It's about telling them what they need to hear. And if they pick up what I'm putting down, great. And if they don't, that's also great. But I suppose one thing people also need is you owe it to them to tell them the truth. That's what's super important.
I think a lot of times in those scenarios, they're not going to sell it for a million anyway, so they'll find their way back to you, right?
Exactly.
We got some questions that we think might relate to some of the stuff you deal with in life. Cold calling or content marketing?
Content marketing.
Why?
Because I think you can build a longer term. The Irish market is different to the American. We don't do as much smiling and dialing when it comes to agency. But I like the idea of content marketing because you're playing a long game, you're building authenticity, and you're building a broader scope of a pipeline than a short, sharp transactional one. And one of the benefits of Ireland is we're small. And if you can start off with someone's life cycle when they start here, you can follow them along. And that's one of the things I like about content.
Open houses, essential or outdated?
It's a delicate dance because as a buying agent, I prefer a private viewing or where I get to view it myself. But open houses are a great way to connect, to understand what's happening in the market and to meet new people. So there's a benefit and a drawback of both. Private, you get it to yourself and you get to assess it from a viewer point of view. But from an agent point of view, if you've got a curated viewing of, let's say, 10 or 15 people, it's an opportunity to explore where they're at. But in an ideal world, private viewing all the way because you then get to have a deeper, richer conversation, but it's not practicable most of the time.
How large is your team?
I have 3 people that work with me.
And one thing I was thinking about with you guys is that, I mean, for me, on the title side, I'll answer a phone call, text on the weekends. I mean, you guys are out there showing homes on the weekends. I mean, you're away from your families. It's not an easy job. Are you getting your other team to show a lot of the houses? Do you mix it up? Do you have people that actually go and work open houses so you can be with your family? What's the culture like there for that?
So the Irish, I suppose, when it comes to property, real estate agents in general, especially the ones who are selling, it tends to be kind of a 6-day week. And those who are in main agencies like franchises would have a day off or a period of time in lieu or a couple of hours during the week. But generally, Saturdays is your day to get the most done and you're going to meet the most people. When it comes to what we do, we try and take a consultative approach. So when we're assessing what you want, we have a line of, let's say, 10 or 15 properties that may have come to the market. Based on what it is you want and your criteria, we'll review it down to 3 or 4. And then depending on the status of the sale, we'll go and view 1 or 2 and then give you an overview. But I suppose one of the challenges in my business is at the moment, my way of explaining things, I can get someone to view a property and to kind of work through the mechanics of it. But I'm that kind of David Attenborough narrator type where I can guide someone through a property and show them the not so sexy approach as opposed to the sweeping marketing statements around it. But for selling agents, yeah, it's a full-time job. I mean, I remember when I was selling, I did a deal the afternoon my mother passed away because it was just automatic. The phone rang, deal had to be done, and you just get on with it. And I think it's also a personality type. There's always a deal to be done. And one of the greatest things that can happen in property, especially, is you open the door at that really quirky time of night with the person who rang you, and it could either be like a first date from hell that went horribly wrong, or it could be that one person that brings that deal over the line. So there's always that what if in the back of people's minds.
That makes a lot of sense. I assume this company is made international. Zillow, friend or foe?
It's American, very American model, but we would have the equivalent, which is Daft and My Home. So it's very similar model. I would view it as a foe and a necessary evil, to be honest with you. So much like cars, they become a platform of necessity for a lot of agents. We're still in the early stages of real estate marketing in Ireland, so videos are kind of the norm now. But in America, there's a lot more effort goes into the marketing style. But I think the portals are, it's pay to play. You're giving them all the data, you're doing all the work and getting all the listings on. You're building trust, and then the portals make you pay to get every single piece of data about your buyers, your interaction, your price points. And I think the difficulty is that a kind of a re-education for agents where, you're dealing with something historic and you have to unlearn that, but it's not an easy task for a lot of them.
Do you have a go-to closing gift?
It depends on the person. So one of the unique things I like about what I do is depending on the conversations I have, I love taking that kind of concierge approach. So if you mention in passing you like golf, for example, I might get you a pass to play golf somewhere unique, or it could be a piece of equipment, or it could be an experience. So I really like to make it very unique to that person. I will say I don't just give people a bottle, like I don't drink, but I don't give people a bottle of wine for the sake of it. I'd rather give them something thoughtful that, even if it's a book, you mention it in passing, you thought it glossed over my head, and then I bring it out, and then you notice that I noticed, which I like.
Psychology's coming back. I like it. Biggest red flag in an agent.
I think the challenge for a lot of agents, if they don't come across in the best way, is usually top down. So it's usually that kind of Glengarry, Glen Ross type of idea, which is, go get the business, do what needs to be done, say what needs to be said, and then that trickles down through the different lines within an agency. And I think the challenge in Ireland is we don't have the same fees you have in America. It's become a race to the bottom for a lot of selling agents. So selling agents could be 1.25% and below. And the life cycle of a sale in Ireland could be upwards of 6 months. So if you imagine someone who's relying on a commission, they're only getting paid a very menial basic. Are they going to give you the time it needs to see a sale through? And how long can they survive? And I think the challenge when it comes to that is it's how they conduct themselves playing for the long term. So that's why I kind of took the alternative approach.
What's a book every agent should read?
Can I give two?
Yes.
So the first one, which has made the most profound impact on my life, especially professionally, is Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss. He kind of comes across the tough guy, but he's very self-aware, and he's got a phenomenal way of explaining how you negotiate. And a lot of people think it needs to be shove you against a wall, I'm going to win, you're going to lose, and that's it. And what he instilled in me was that real understanding of there's a cadence and a dance to these things where it doesn't have to be that I pull one over on you, but I can understand what your motivations are. And the second one is by a British author, and he's actually, I think he's like vice chairman in Ogilvy. So you may have come across Ogilvy, the big advertising marketing company, and it's called Alchemy. And what he talks about is it's not about logic, it's about psycho logic. So a very brief example, if I may, he talked about making the trains in England. They want to spend billions making them faster. And someone said, well, instead of making them faster, what if we give people tables, charging trays, and a time that says how long you've got left in your journey, which for a fraction of the cost. And there was a perfect example of how they actually got people to be a lot more satisfied with their trip than spending money on making a bullet train. It's a really interesting insight into how people work.
What do you see as the future for you in your business?
I suppose what I love about what I do is I get to be myself every day, and I want to empower the people that work with me. So a big part of like what you were saying, I love to see other people win as well. I suppose as my business grows, I'd love to continue to create a brand and a name that grows beyond me. And scaling with my type of business is one of those challenges, but it's something I enjoy because every day you're learning something new about what you can create, the value you can add. But I think it's the fact that like everything is always changing all the time. Nothing is permanent. So I'm not concerned with a title and a business that has to last forever. We make plans and God laughs. So I think it's the unknown that I'm embracing rather than running away from. So it's that kind of excitement of what's to come.
Love it. If we have people out there want to work with you in Ireland, or when I'm going to come visit, how do we get a hold of you?
A couple of different ways. I'm very active on LinkedIn, so that's LinkedIn Andrew Rhatigan, and there's a silent H in there, so it's like the P in pneumonia. Don't forget it. There's a silent H just after the R, and then you've also got rre.ie, so that's Rhatigan Real Estate, so rre.ie. And you can reach out to us, ask us questions, and you can also join our newsletter, which is on the website and on LinkedIn.
I think you have a great perspective. I love the angle you come from. I thank you for my free psychology lesson today. Is that what it's called? Therapy session. I really enjoyed the time. Thanks for coming on.
Me too. It was an absolute pleasure. And don't forget to book me for your next guide when you're moving to Ireland.
100%.